everybody. Today we're going to make some bone broth, and we're going to work on beef bone stock today specifically. So what I have going here first in the oven are about 5 pounds of bones that have some little bit of meat on them, and I have it on convect about 300. If you don't have a convection oven, 350 would be just fine, and you're going to just kind of roast them for about 30 to 45 minutes to brown any little bits of meat. If the bones are solely like bony pieces, then you don't necessarily need to do that, but it's an important step to kind of brown any little bits of meat that are not cooked. Other than that, we need some red wine, some pieces, celery pieces. I just kind of save the tops from my celery as I go and use them, and then when I'm ready to make some broth, then I just have the little tips. If you don't have some of these things, it's okay. If you maybe don't have some carrots or something, then try to just make your stock anyway. It'll be okay without it, but it's going to have better flavor and better nutrient quality if you do have it. So other than the celery, just a few sticks of celery is plenty. A few carrots, I have about a pound of carrots, and then 1 onion. Two might be better, but 1 onion's okay. Like I said too, you need some sort of acid. I like to use red wine for beef, and then white wine or just vinegar for chicken. But so I just have about a cup, and that's going to be more than enough to go in our stock. You need a huge pot. And I like, this is like a 10-quart pressure cooker, and I kind of like that because I can I'm not going to pressure cook this, but I'm going to use the lid. It's going to sit on there nice and kind of loosely, and so that will be important later. So other than that, we're going to need a bunch of water to cover everything, but we're going to let those bones cook for a little bit longer. I have my vegetables kind of loosely chopped up, and chop up this onion, and we're going to make some really wonderful bone broth that's going to be really healthy for your bones and your connective tissue. There are glycosaminoglycans, which are the natural form of basically like glucosamine and chondroitin, that supplement that you might have heard of for joint, just for joint integrity and joint health. That is what you're going to naturally find in the bone broth, and it's going to be so good for you. Good for your digestive system, good for those, your connective tissue, and just good, high quality nutrients. And you can drink it straight. You can add it and make wonderful soups. There's just endless possibilities of what you can do with your own homemade bone broth, and it's going to be so much better than bouillon cubes, which are just flavor, and salt, there's really no nutrition in little bouillon. So I hope that I can show you some easy steps and how you can make your own bone broth. Okay, so our bones have been roasting for about 30 minutes, and now I'm going to take and add, I've already added a little bit of water, and I'm going to throw my bones in the pot and also add the vegetables. So you can find bones like this. You can order them online to find a dealer, a farmer that has grass-fed bones, or grass-fed animals, or I actually just went straight to our to a butcher to find these. So there's lots of different ideas. You can find them at your local grocery store, but sometimes you might not be as able to find the best quality. Grass-fed's going to be the best. Organic's not necessarily as big of a deal, but grass-fed really tends to have higher quality. So throwing in those vegetables, and then we're also going to add that adding our acid. So my choice is red wine, and so I'm going to add a little bit of that, and then our celery. last here, throw this all in, and my pot is pretty well full. I'm going to bring this up to a boil. Okay, adding not quite a cup of red wine. And then lastly, the other thing we want to add are some herbs. And I'm going to add just a little salt, about a teaspoon or so, maybe a little bit more salt. And then I have some rosemary, just dump it in a little bit, about a couple teaspoons worth. And parsley, you can add thyme, just any nice kind of neutral herb. It's going to add, there's a lot of nutrients in those herbs, and also just add some good flavor. So I'm going to just try to stir this in a little bit, but my pot's pretty full. Again, this was about a 10-quart pressure cooker. You can use any kind of saucepan. You can reduce the size if you want to maybe start out with something a little more manageable. Then try just a few pounds of bones and use a smaller pan. And again, we're going to get this boiling and then reduce it to a simmer. I'm going to let the lid sit on here, but I'm not going to lock it down tight. And so that'll be important. We'll want to have the lid tipped off just a little bit, which can kind of leave a mess because the condensation will kind of drip down. It can drip down your oven, your stove. So just be mindful of that. And so get it up to a boil, but then turn it down to a simmer, and we will let this cook for at least 12 hours, if more, if possible, up to 72 hours. And the longer that it cooks, the more that the nutrients are going to be just released into that liquid, and you're going to have kind of this gelatinous looking brown liquid. It might not even necessarily smell the best, but it's going to be so good for you. Remember too that the marrow inside, if you have some pretty big bones, that marrow can be used for other things, so save that. You can also, after like 2 or 3 hours, go in, and if you have any kind of larger chunks of meat, go and retrieve those, and you could use those or eat those and consume them separately. So my pieces were all pretty well devoid of any meat left over, so I'm not going to worry about that too much. You'll also, lastly, you'll have kind of a layer of fat that will form, and you don't really need to remove that. Those are good fats, and going to add good flavor to whatever you're adding your stock to, or whatever you're adding to your stock. So I like to do more than 12 hours, but after that point, whatever between 12 and 72 hours, you're going to just strain out the broth. I use a big colander and a big glass, container to start with, and then just strain out the liquid, and then store them in either just glass jars, or I usually just freeze. This will make like 3 liters worth approximately, and I'll kind of store it in about that size of container, let it cool, and just put it in the freezer, and then have enough for a soup or whatever that I want to add it to, and then that's a good way to store it. So those are the steps, and again, just since it has to go overnight, or 12 hours, most likely overnight, you can either rest assured that your stove will be okay with it being on very low overnight, or you can take a big towel, turn it off, wrap the towel around your pot, and just leave it off all night, and then in the morning bring it back up, kind of get it up and going, turn it up higher, but then turn it back down to a simmer, and that will be an alternative if you're concerned about leaving your stovetop on all night. But otherwise, you're going to be leaving that stovetop on for quite a while. The last alternative that I want to give you is you can do this in the crock pot, and that might be another easy way, a little less maintenance maybe, and pretty much follow the same steps, but just leave it in your crock pot, and leave it on low, and follow those same steps. So enjoy making your own bone broth, and the health that it will bring to you and your family.